Hello, 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 everybody. I'm talking to you from a studio in Chennai, my hometown, but I have so much news to share with you because, look, starting off, I want to welcome you to the June edition of the podcast Anita Says, which is a monthly captured perspective of my take on the global events that shape Indian and South Asian dance. Well, we've arrived at the halfway point. Can we believe it that almost 6 months of the year is already gone? Okay. So there's a lot to talk about because June has Father's Day, the longest day of the year, June 21st, which is the summer solstice, and also Juneteenth, which I will tell you more about. But I want to open with a quote from tech pioneer Steve Jobs, who says, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it by living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking." I also want to add a beautiful saying by Canadian writer Margaret Atwood, and she says, quote, "In the end, we'll all become just stories." So here we go. Having not watched dance or any performance or engaged with anyone connected with dance for a full month is a rarity for me. But it was a conscious decision. I needed to disconnect and distance myself for some time to be able to refocus and perhaps even float. I wanted to enjoy a rhythm where there were no deadlines, no rehearsals, no performance-related duties, and no compulsions to finish or complete any project. A real privilege, I know, but something that was long overdue. I did not climb a mountain or seclude myself in any ashram or resort. Instead, it was a month of travel, immersing myself with family, grandnieces and nephews, and re-engaging with literature, poetry, and books that have been piling up by my bedside. The everyday simplicity of routines of making 5 a.m. coffee by myself was so restful. I enjoyed a 10-day break with my sister in Europe, took long leisurely strolls along cobbled streets and canals, and realized the many advantages of living in India, while just visiting and admiring and marveling at the brilliant museums that were on display in Amsterdam for thousands of tourists like myself. I also realized why Denmark is amongst the happiest countries on earth. The Danes being a relaxed, elegant, and refined version of the modern Scandinavian. While there seems to be no decrease in dance programs, festivals, and dance-related events in India despite the blistering heat, the buzz and chatter of excitement with the young diaspora dancers was both palpable and audible via social media. However, in this edition, I will choose to focus on issues that are emerging or have continued to hover around the ecosystem of Indian dance. You're listening to the podcast Anita Says, a monthly captured perspective on Indian dance, and I'm Anita Ratnam. It's June, and that means Pride Month. Those of you who follow me on social media handles know that I'm a vocal and visible ally of the LGBTQIA+ communities. As identities become more complex and fluid, and voices more nuanced, I reaffirm my support to every single individual who chooses to live and love as they please. We live in a rainbow world, and the creative industries have always welcomed everybody across the identity spectrum. So this June and every month that follows, I want to wish each and every one who has found the courage to stand up, speak up, and live life on their own terms. In South Asian dance classes across the world, I would like to urge the teachers to gently speak about these issues with sensitivity and maturity. We cannot continue to carry our phobias and limited knowledge of gender and sexuality into the world today. Non-binary artists like Bharatanatyam dancer Kiran Rajagopalan are beginning to investigate the vocabulary and language of Indian classical dance. He feels that themes and narratives that closer align with his identity is more important now than ever. Falling back on well-known stories like Brihannala and Shikhandi from the Mahabharata epic is too convenient and overdone. It is time, he feels, to create a contemporary mythology, draw from modern literature and poetry, and push the familiar vocabularies towards new meanings. This, Kiran feels, calls for collaboration, patience, humility, and time. I've learned so much from so many of these non-binary, wildly imaginative, generous, and supremely talented individuals in the worlds of art, fashion, music, architecture, travel, makeup, photography, choreography, and just an all-round passion for life. I'm so grateful to so many of you who are in my life. You know who you are. Thank you for being my cheerleaders and for believing in my dreams. What is urgent art? We watch the crumbling of the Berlin Wall on television. It is widely believed now that the end of the Vietnam War was hastened after the horrific images were shown to Americans on their daily evening news. Now, almost everywhere except in India, where the national elections continue to dominate headlines, news channels have the lead story only about the Israel-Palestine conflict. During my visit to Copenhagen, Denmark, the chatter in coffee shops was about the Eurovision Song Competition, which is Europe's biggest television event. Huge crowds gathered inside and outside the auditorium in Malmö, Sweden, to protest and boo Israeli singer Eden Golan. There was so much anger directed at this 20-year-old performer that Ms. Golan was surrounded by heavily armed security guards wherever she went. Eden Golan did not win the competition, but that single cultural event displayed the mood and the polarization of the general public towards the mounting death toll in Gaza. Wearing the keffiyeh scarf has become a visible act of protest with many young people across the world. A few Indian dancers are also draping this fabric and continuing to perform dances about the ongoing conflict, but dressed in traditional dance attire. Is this mere tokenism? In India, there are so many social issues of caste and class to grapple with. Children are dying of hunger, and orphanages are starved for donations to feed their inhabitants. Nigeria has announced tough and crippling laws against the LGBTQ communities. Every country is grappling with growing social unrest and inequality. Why then Gaza? What about the hostages? Why have Indian dancers become so gripped with the ongoing conflict? Is it the relentless barrage of television images? Do we truly understand the complexity and the political backdrop of the 75-year-old issue? Or is it just another chance for dancers to make a reel? Just another gig? Bharatanatyam dancer Aranyani Bhargav has initiated a call for all Indian classical dancers to unite in support of the children of Gaza who are suffering in this 8-month-long conflict. The death toll is nearly 15,000 killed and mounting. Over 150 dancers have responded, me included, by sending a single photo. The movement has since grown towards a performance evening in Bangalore on July 7th. There is an unease, however, about being on the wrong side of history. Many dancers feel as if they are being forced to take a side and choose a position. Critics who write about social, political issues of caste, race, and gender are calling this, quote, upper-class performative emptiness and, quote, a massaging of personal ego and self-gratification, end quote. I have always believed that such intense and gruesome conflicts are better interpreted through the mediums of cinema, theatre, writing, public speaking, and even poetry. The dancing body is both limited and distracting. It cannot convincingly portray the savagery of war without the collaboration of sound projection, light, and giant spectacle. Having said this, I also agree with Aranyani who says, our bodies are the canvas, and we must respond in the way we know and understand. The daily onslaught of death and disaster on television and social media bring back the macabre words of CNN founder Ted Turner. War and death make great news, he once said. I recall here the iconic 3-minute solo by American modern dancer Martha Graham in 1930. Lamentations was her response to the horrors of World War I. draped in the purple stretch jersey cocoon. The choreography continues to live and speak about a woman, mother, daughter, sister's response to the senseless destruction. Every creative individual has a right to respond in the way they feel best equipped to. There are many young dancers who have refrained to comment or participate in what looks like a war without an end. Writer Samhita Arni puts it succinctly. War is kind to men. It is the women and children who are left behind, wailing in lakes of blood. You're listening to the podcast Anita Says, and I'm Anita Ratnam. Hira Mandi and the Lost Luster. There is simmering discontent and grumbling in the Kathak community about the new Netflix television series Hira Mandi, the Diamond Bazaar, which highlights the lives of the fabulous courtesans of Lahore in pre-partition India. The gorgeous spectacle, fabulous costumes, pleasing music, and pleasant choreography by Kriti Mahesh and Ashish Patil has not been able to save the 8-part series from savage criticism. The accomplished and talented hereditary artists have been reduced to cardboard cutouts of sex-starved, manipulative women with none of their literary, performative, and creative genius being explored. In reality, Hira Mandi was once a very famous locality in present-day Pakistan. Sons and daughters of nobility and the socially affluent were tutored by these performers on the finer nuances of courtesy and social graces. Childless families also adopted children from this community. These women were empowered, wealthy, creative, and brilliant, and were the most sought-after special guests for any social event. Today, they would be the A-listers, walking the red carpet at Cannes and the Met Costume Ball. Senior Kathak guru Shobna Narayan, who has not watched the series yet, but who has heard a lot of commentary on it, says, these families of highly accomplished artists were poets, writers, authors, musicians, and performers, and were the final word on every aspect of etiquette. Seizing only the titillating, eye-catching, and gossip-worthy aspects of these artists' lives is irresponsible. Such skewed depictions become resource material for future generations. Kathak performer and teacher Sangeeta Chatterjee has another viewpoint. This is Kathak-inspired choreography. The abhinaya depicted is filmy and certainly not the kind of abhinaya that is performed in Kathak. The film's Pakizan Umrao Jan had great artists like Guru Lachu Maharaj, Pandit Birju Maharaj, and Kumudini Lakhya as choreographers. In Kathak classes, students are avidly discussing the series and trying to imitate the sensuous Gajagamini walk and suggestive glances of these television artists. The dance teachers are now having to explain the historical and social backdrop of the story and to acknowledge this community's participation in the fight to free their land of colonial rule. New students are enrolling in classes and asking to be taught Hira Mandi Kathak. One young dance teacher said that thanks to director Sanjay Leela Bansali, at least people now know what is Kathak and they don't confuse it anymore with Kathakali. Small mercies indeed. Hira Mandi is a runaway hit, with audiences worldwide, but I had to plod through the episodes, getting more and more impatient with the fudging of history and the storyline. The word mujra has become a pejorative and is being used by senior politicians at their election rallies. On Instagram, Indian dancers across styles are using audio clips from the series to create their own reels, but the final result appears overtly coquettish. You're listening to the podcast Anita Says, and I'm Anita Ratnam. A pushback on trigger alerts. When I read the trigger alert before the classic Martin Scorsese film Goodfellas, I felt the limit had been reached. This 1990 film is a terrific story about the Sicilian-Italian mafia. The announcement was claiming to, quote, not hurt the sentiments of any particular community, end quote. Really? The dreaded mafia, Cosa Nostra, was from Sicily, Italy. During my visit to Palermo, tour guides were proudly showing me buildings with bullet holes where shootouts occurred. And among the most popular walking destinations is a particular mountain that contains numerous buried bodies, casualties of the brutal Sicilian mob war. Are we taking these trigger alerts too far? 87-year-old British actress Judi Dench had a blunt response to this trend. Get a thick skin or stay home, she suggests. Other senior British actors are pushing back at such announcements being made before the start of some Shakespeare plays. We know that there's going to be revenge, murder, death, even incest. But nobody wants to be told that King Lear will die even before the play starts, said actor Ray Fiennes. The very act of going to watch theatre and dance or any of the live arts is to be provoked, stirred, moved, and to emerge perhaps thoughtful, maybe even disturbed. What is the purpose of art? How can every creative thought or idea be filtered through the woke trigger alert lens? Will this mean that before some traditional dance pieces that suggest a minor girl's infatuation with an older man god, we need to include trigger alerts in the announcements? There are some traditional javalis and padams which have suggestive and sensual lyrics. Today's young dancers often perform these traditional pieces without a complete understanding of the subtext. In the name of empathy, sensitivity, inclusivity, and caring, how far will this political correctness be stretched? I now read about something else that's emerging: sending legal notices for negative film reviews. It has begun with the Malayalam film Turbo, starring actor icon Mammootty. The producer's notice claims that negative reviews will hurt the film's commercial box office prospects. Gosh, in the dance world, we don't even think about box office because we don't have one. Most of the performances are free. As for negative reviews, nobody really cares, because if any hint of something that is less than adulatory about a certain performance appears in public, it is immediately countered with all kinds of identity accusations, cancellation notices, and insults on social media. Whose right is it? Copyright continues to fester and trouble many Indian dance and arts managers and producers. The current legal tussle between Tamil film music composer Ilayaraja and the makers of the Malayalam film Manjumal Boys is an interesting case study. According to copyright lawyer Gladys Rosette Daniel, there is an amendment to the 2017 Copyright Act for music and sound recordings. In that year, the act was changed to accommodate the rights of the lyricist and the composer, a three-way split of copyright. Not just the producer, even if the producer has paid both the composer and the lyricist for their work. So, composer Ilayaraja's claim that he has not given permission or been paid compensation for the use of his song in the film's publicity campaign is both right, but is also a double-edged sword. The matter is now in the courts, and one of the solutions seems to be that the producer of the film should pay both the composer and the lyricist an additional amount for the outright purchase and thus become the sole copyright owner. When it comes to dance productions and stage-related work, this Copyright Act is very different. Regarded as dramatic works, the complete copyright rests with the producer, who is that person who has paid for the music, lyrics if written fresh, costume design, stage design, sets, lighting, publicity material, photography, videography, social media engagement, and choreography. Even if an independent choreographer has been hired and commissioned to mount the choreography on company dancers, it is the person who pays for all these services who owns the copyright of the completed dance, stage, theatre, live arts work. However, Gladys Rosette Daniel cautions that while taking signed receipts for payments, every artist and professional who has been engaged and paid for their services must also sign a release assigning all future use of the said creative material to the producer in perpetuity. Particular attention should be paid in getting the releases for music composition because it often entails huge costs to the dance producers. This is more paperwork, especially for Indian dancers and companies based in India, but this is a very normal procedure for many South Asian dance companies and independent artists who work overseas, particularly while receiving taxpayers' money as grants from arts councils to incubate, perform, and tour the dance work. These kinds of signed receipts and releases become all the more important. Juneteenth. What does this mean? And more. June contains the longest day of the year, the 21st, the summer solstice. It's also Father's Day, Sunday, June 16th. But it is also the month where June 19th is marked as Juneteenth to commemorate the emancipation of enslaved people in the US. The Olympics begin in Paris, where hip-hop, that was born on the streets of Harlem and New York City, makes its debut. And of course, it's 30 days of celebrating Pride. Thank you for the growing support for this podcast, Anita Says. Make sure to tell your friends to listen, subscribe, and comment. I've been writing this monthly column on the Nartaki portal since January 2011, and that means it's been nearly 14 years and over 160 editorials. But on this podcast medium, we are about, well, not yet a year. So dance continues to engage, interest, and fascinate me, and I hope to continue sharing and discussing the art form that binds us all. With the sun shining, I hope your spirits are soaring, your heart is warm, and your hopes flying high. Stay positive, everybody, in a world that has gone mad. Renew your faith in the dance art and, most importantly, in yourselves. Until next time, this is Anita Ratnam, signing off from the Chennai studio of Digi Sound with executive engineer and sound recordist L. Baba Prasad.